and the recording will be made available via our YouTube channel after the event. Also, every participant will receive a certificate of attendance. Please submit any questions you have in the chat box, and we will answer these at the end of the session. Without further delay, I'm excited to hand over to Iwonna, author of the Pearson English title, Business Partner. Thank you, Iwonna.
Thank you, Charlie, and good morning to you all. Well, I'm here in Barcelona, Spain, where I've been living and teaching English for the last 30 years or so. And maybe in the chat there, you can just say hello to everybody and say where you're from, whether it's from China or Argentina or Russia or the Ukraine or Poland or the UK or Spain or Italy or Japan. That would be nice to see. So we're talking today about how to teach professional English remotely. Now, I'll be using the term teaching online, but here the idea remotely is that we're in a situation where we used to have face-to-face classes, and now because of the lockdown or because of restrictions or because the world is changing, the world of teaching and learning is changing, more and more of our classes have become online. For example, in my case, I teach here at the university in Barcelona, Eura Aula, to students of tourism. So I teach in higher education, more recently also at the University of Bath, teaching academic skills there, as well as other universities in the past in Spain, but also business English teaching face-to-face in company, which is what I've been doing for most of my career. And many of you are probably in the same situation. And you could also write in chat maybe about your teaching context. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of activities that maybe work or don't work so well online or when teaching remotely, and give you a few ideas. And I'll be asking you lots of questions in chat, so please contribute. But if you're happy just to sit back and listen, that's also fine. So as everybody knows, because of the pandemic, our lives have changed dramatically. The world of work has changed dramatically, and so has education. Maybe you didn't conceive yourself teaching online using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or other platforms like Google Meet for classes, but now it's what we're doing often on a daily basis. So are you ready for what's next? Now, if you're like me, maybe you had some experience of attending webinars, maybe giving the odd online class or even telephone class before in the past. And then suddenly this year, 2020, as from about March, depending which country you're in, we suddenly had a very steep learning curve where we had to learn how to use different platforms literally overnight or over a weekend, which was the case here in Spain, in Barcelona. And what I have found was that I've suddenly had to learn to use different platforms. I was already using maybe Moodle for some university classes and company classes, but all of a sudden we had to learn how to use Zoom or other platforms. Microsoft Teams became more part of our lives. And all these platforms actually was kind of a bit too much information, and I felt overwhelmed and overloaded. And I was more worried about the nuts and the bolts and learning how to use this rather than focusing maybe on the actual teaching and how my students were learning. Since then, we've had many useful workshops and seminars and other webinars, for example, from Dr. Ken Beattie, who's also talking as part of this series, Ready for What's Next. And now we have lots of videos available to us and information also from Pearson about what we can do and how we can do it. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you a question. I've been talking about my situation. So are we ready for what's coming? Is it going to be more of the same, or is it going to change back to face-to-face, do you think? But let's focus first of all on this first question. And Charlie, you've got a poll there set up for our participants today. And the question is, how are you mostly teaching now? Face-to-face, online, or with blended courses, or maybe a mix of all three or four. It's possible that you might have hybrid classes as well, where you're going in to an institution and teaching, but sometimes students are joining you online. So if you could answer that, that would be great. In my particular case, it's a mix. It's a mix of all three or more.
Brilliant.
So just
So
wait.
those are being answered now.
Lovely.
Had about 25% so far.
Okay, just please put in your answers, and this way I can get to know you a little bit better and what your teaching setting is.
That's great. So just to confirm, once you've entered your answers, you click the submit button at the bottom of your screen.
Thank you. Right, I can see people from all parts of the world have joined us, from Saudi Arabia as well, from Russia, from Italy. Good morning, from Lithuania, from Turkey. Hello, from Georgia, Kiev, Philippines, Indonesia. Wow, we have a great range of nationalities. Hello from Qatar. Oh, there's so many messages. Oh, Poznan. I have relatives near Poznan. Hello to people in Poznan. And Germany as well. I remember being in Berlin last year for the ITEFL, BESIG. Okay, do we have some results there, Charlie?
Yeah, absolutely. Sharing them now.
Wow, okay. So 48% of you have voted. And do we have a breakdown there?
You should be able to see that. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Read it out.
Yes, yes, please.
Yeah. So for the first question, do you mostly teach? Face-to-face was 11%. Online
Right.
courses is 26%.
Hmm.
Blended courses is down at 8%. And a mix of all three was 12%.
Right. So quite a mix there then. And like I said before, I'm sort of in the situation doing all of those things. Also blended. Right. Thank you. So thanks for that, Charlie. Can we go back to can we go to the next question now?
There was already in this poll, there was already the
yes.
second question asking, do you imagine that in 1 year's time you'll be mostly teaching courses that are face-to-face, online, blended, and a mix of all three? So they've already answered those questions.
I see. Right. And so, yes, Charlie?
The results of those, would you like to hear?
Yes, please, because I can't see them on my screen.
Okay, so in 1 year's time, face-to-face was 5%, online was 12%, blended was 13%, and a mix of all three was 16%.
Right. So I think all the others have won again with 16%. Well, that's right. Obviously, there's a fair amount of uncertainty that we've had in the last few months and also in the future. But we can imagine, looking into your crystal ball, that the situation probably won't change that much, and we'll probably be giving even more online classes or a mixture of blended teaching face-to-face when we can. So if we can go back to the slides now. Thank you very much. Thank you for... Right, so there's kind of questions for you to think about. And to start off with today, before I talk about activities, I'd like to just mention these two terms. Now, you've probably heard these before, classes or activities that we can teach that are asynchronously, which means not at the same time as when you're actually giving the class, doing the live class, either face-to-face or online. And those activities that we do synchronously, so at the same time when you are in the class, either face-to-face or teaching live online. And I'm sure you found that some you've worked better than others to do outside the classroom, and others obviously in the classroom. Now, in the workplace that I've been teaching here in Barcelona in company classes for professionals, the training managers there have been telling us, please try to use that online class as much as you can for communication activities, for speaking, for sharing ideas, role plays, etc. And you've probably found the same. And what we have learned over the last few months is that some other activities, for example, as you would set homework for students previously, then maybe more controlled practice, students doing research, students sort of writing and reading and watching videos or longer videos, those kind of activities would probably work best asynchronously. And if you also may have found, like myself, that before you might have had more hours in the face-to-face setting, and now maybe those sort of 2 or 3 hour classes have been reduced to maybe 1.5 or 2 hours a week, or even 1 hour a week. So we've had to learn to be sort of compact that class and do as much communicative practice as possible, and leave some other activities up to the students sort of before and after the class. So the question for you then is, I've mentioned already a couple, is if we think about asynchronous teaching, what kind of activities, you can write this in chat, what kind of activities then work best? So these are activities not done at the same time as you're teaching. These activities that the students do in preparation for a class or as a follow-up afterwards to practice their language and business skills. If you'd like to write in chat some ideas there, and then we'll compare with the ideas I have. Okay, right. I'm just going to have a look at what's happening in chat, so bear with me. And if you just want to sit back and listen, that's fine, but please join in the chat if you want to be more active in this webinar. Right, so we've got reading, writing, exactly, video and reading text, that's right. Online exercises with self-check, that's right, and the beauty is, of course, now we have a lot of online resources, for example, with Pearson's publication, specifically Business Partner, that I've been working on recently. There you have the answer keys, but also with other course books and other publishers, the students can access audio scripts and videos and audio online. Discussion posts, that's right. So maybe you're working more as an e-moderator that you didn't imagine yourself doing before. And there are discussion and forum posts that you might just be checking now and again. That's right, online worksheets. That's right. Okay. Research projects, exactly. Taking photos, that's right, and doing something more creative. Lovely to see all those ideas. So these are some of the ideas that I had. It's not an exhaustive list. It's that some ideas to fit on the slide. Students can watch videos and also listen to audio at their own pace, and that's very important because when they're listening in a class, either online or face-to-face, they don't have control about their listening, and this can be extremely frustrating, as we know. But that's something they do enjoy, listening at their own pace, stopping, pausing, watching it as many times as they like. Also, obviously, the longer reading texts to improve their extensive listening and reading skills. And exactly, we've talked about online exercise here, more control practice. Possibly they might be recording videos as well if the class is only just online, which is also taking them a fair while. But they can still be communicative tasks, but these are done outside the classroom, and obviously research and prep work. Okay. Yes, I can see people are writing about the certificate links, but Charlie will get back to you about the certificate links. Thank you. So the next question, of course, then is what kind of activities working well for you synchronously when you're giving the face-to-face class or giving the class remotely? So again, if you can add discussions, role plays, exactly. Gap filling, well, yes, some exercises lend themselves to both types. With the gap fill exercise, you can actually focus everyone's attention on the particular exercise on screen and do it together in open class. And as long as you're not just doing gap fills, that might work. Especially it's good to review maybe what they've been doing before. Exactly, quizzes, teamwork, presentations, exactly. A worksheet, sorry, that they've had to complete before and then maybe discuss. That's right. Short grammar exercise, that's right. Focusing on something that they've reviewed previously, and pair work and group work. Now, with my situation, I've been working with different platforms, and sometimes I have access to breakout rooms, for example, with the BBB, Big Blue Button, or with Microsoft Teams, but other times I don't. And for example, with Google Meet, I've created my own sort of breakout rooms in that I've asked students to, I've set up a role play or group work activity, and then I basically tell them to organize themselves in threes or fours, and they set up separate Google Hangout calls. They have to invite me so I can sort of dip in and monitor and listen to one group if I want to. And then we come back together in the online class together, and we might hear, when we'll hear back feedback or reports from each team, with one person reporting back, which takes a little bit of time, but I think it's a very important stage in the process here when we're doing that kind of thing. And debates, exactly. Exactly. You've come up with very similar ideas to mine. So yes, even in Google Meet, that's right. I've asked students to just set up a Google Hangout and ask them to invite me so I can join if I want to listen to one of the groups, and then we come back. So here we can see, of course, presentations. I'm giving a presentation to you now. It's the most natural thing that lends itself to online classes. And I found that's worked very well with my university students, for example, or within company students. They're going to be giving presentations in the next couple of weeks where they choose a topic from the course. And I found that the other students in the class, they might switch off with presentations. So obviously be careful, don't do sort of 7, 8 presentations maybe in one class. You might want to spread them out over a couple of classes. Also group presentations work well. And they respond to each other very well because they realize how much work has been involved, the prep work and the research. And maybe people who don't often speak in class going on camera and on mic and speaking, and they're very encouraging in the chat. So in the live classroom face-to-face, they might be clapping or knocking on the tables if you live in Germany. But online, we get a great response from the other students, sort of saying, well done, and asking questions as you are now, or contributing as you are now. Working in pairs is the best way. Yeah, if you have larger classes, like I do in higher education, well, I have a mix. Those might work best in small groups of 3 and 4, but otherwise, yeah, pair work works very well. It's kind of more manageable, probably, and easier to organize. Oh, okay. So exactly, with pair work on Microsoft Teams, again, the students just set up their own call. Yeah, they set up their own meeting, a separate meeting, and then you make sure you give them a deadline. So you say that for this activity, you will have 8 minutes or 10 minutes, and then they come back to the classroom, the online classroom, when that is finished. One-to-one online classes, I think a lot of these activities, like a discussion, an information gap, will work with on one-to-one classes. Also presentations, obviously, and also the shorter writing tasks, they will work. And the great thing about the one-to-one classes is that you can really coach your student through a role play and through a presentation, ask them to repeat it, and record it, send recordings to each other, correct their pronunciation. So obviously the one-to-one class is different, but it can be very interactive with yourself and the one participant. I also give a one-to-one classes. Okay, and you can still obviously do the role plays. Yeah, meetings and negotiations. You might have to adapt depending on the course material, obviously. Right. Oh, yes. Good question. What's a dicta class? Now, I'll be coming to that later. I'll be answering the question later. But maybe before I do, yes, I do use the big blue button. I use that for my classes. That's right. It does work with Moodle. That's right. So I work for a place called NELC here in Barcelona. And exactly, we use the Moodle together with the big blue button where we can have breakout rooms. And very similar to this, a draw function and showing the slides. Question now is, what's kind of more the big blue button? If you'd like to answer those questions between yourselves, that would be great. But just to explain now briefly, it's another online platform that we can use for presenting and teaching. Okay, so there are different platforms about, whether it's Google Meet or Zoom or Big Blue Button, or Microsoft Teams. We can use all of those for teaching. And in my particular situation, I've had to use or learn to use a little bit about a lot of them, but maybe in your institution, or if you're just giving classes from home, you might just be using one or two. Right, so that's right, it is convenient. So what's more difficult actually to do online? Well, as we can see from this picture, exactly, having a face-to-face conversation, sort of laughing, seeing each other's people's body language, their facial expressions, this kind of group feeling that's sometimes missing. Even if you have face-to-face classes now, for example, in higher education, the desks are separated by 1.5 meters. Students are wearing masks. In my particular university, the students aren't allowed to walk around and get up. They have to stay seated, whereas the teacher can move around. So this kind of makes this human interaction much more difficult. We can't have a party anymore at the end of the course or at the just before Christmas. So those are kind of obvious things that we can't do anymore. Another one, I saw this in the course but recently: have a quick chat with the person next to you. I'll give you 30 seconds. We can't say that anymore now, can we? That maybe they can chat with a buddy or a partner for the class that day. I make sure they don't always work with friends, obviously, even though the class is online. Sometimes I just match them up according to who I can see on camera, on screen, and just get them to work together with the next person in the video. What else is kind of difficult to do then online? Speaking focused interaction. Okay, I think we can do that in you can speak in the chat where we have a lot of participants, like today. For example, with my university class, I have about 20 students, and we still manage to do quite a lot of speaking using either in open class, teacher to student, or student to student as well, or when they're in the breakout rooms. I think it is possible to do role plays, but it's difficult. So it's possible, but it needs a bit of setting up. That's right. Your students are business managers, one-to-one. So, well, that's perfect. You can do a lot of speaking, but maybe other things then are more difficult. Monitoring, that's right. Exactly, mingling activities. Find someone who, we always used to love doing that activity. Students stand up, walk about, and that's right. Yes, you can still have lots of discussions with 35 students. I don't think the number there is a problem. Essay feedback. Well, I would give essay feedback as I was doing before. Either you could record a video of yourself to give feedback to all of the class, or you could also have written feedback using a shared document, which is what I have been doing the last few years. Online teaching is not enough time at school. That's right. Yes, it's often the classes are shorter. So here, I'm getting taken up by the chat, which is quite distracting, as you have just seen. But let's move on. So what's more difficult? This idea of rapport and relationship building, monitoring, people have mentioned. I think if you set up the breakout rooms, or you get them to invite you to chat, whether it's a Google Hangout, then it's kind of easier for you to monitor. But I do think here that takes a little bit of thought, and you might want to model a conversation with a stronger student at the beginning before they go off in their pairs. Try to monitor if you can whilst they're doing an activity, and when you regroup, I think it's a good idea, again, this idea of performance and improving with an extra performance, choosing a pair or a group to act out part of the conversation or part of the role play, and get the others to listen and note take. Also, if you have larger classes, something here you can still do online. If there are a group of 3, 2 people are doing the role play, and the third person maybe is listening and is the note taker and reports back. So you give them a specific role. Okay, yes, that's right. Some are camera shy, and students who are camera shy, it's a difficult one, and I will ask you the question in chat. Do you think it's good? Do you tell your students to go on camera? Do you insist on that? The two places where I work here in Barcelona, the management, they both insist that the students are on camera. I must admit, I like to see that the students are there, but maybe you think that's not a problem. Maybe they don't have to go on camera. Would you like to write your thoughts about that? Yeah. Should students always go on camera, or does it depend? What does it depend on? Is it fair in a class that some students are on camera and others are just using the audio? Now, of course, here we have questions of connectivity coming in, which is the big difficulty, isn't it? People maybe not being on having an internet cable, they're on the Wi-Fi. I know my students are often saying that their parents are, having meetings and they're using the internet cable and they're on the Wi-Fi and the connection maybe isn't so good, or they have problems with their mic. So these kind of little technical issues, it's good to discuss with students at the beginning of the class, at the beginning of the course. Make sure they've got either headphones or earphones. Try to avoid being on the Wi-Fi, being directly connected to an internet cable. You insist turning their cameras on. Yes, and in my institution, we have to insist on it because of attendance, to make sure students are engaged. But obviously I can't see you now. I can see you're engaged from the chat, or some of you are. Some of you might just be having a cup of coffee or answering your emails. I can see you. That's just a joke. And so, yeah. And moving on then to another question is, I think motivation can be difficult online. Especially when you think about our business students, those one-to-one students, they've been maybe in conferences, video calls, online all day, connected all day. Then they're probably helping maybe their children with online classes, and then there isn't a boundary, so their work then maybe blurs into an English class, yeah, or a dance class that's online, and then this is all in the home environment. So some students might feel that they're always kind of on camera, and this can be very tiring. Yeah. So we know that as teachers, when we're presenting, it's you have kind of have higher energy levels. Yeah. You have to be very aware of what's happening. You have to be good at multitasking, and it's different than maybe just working on the computer. In another kind of job. So our students are sort of feeling this burnout, if you like. It can be tiring. So what can we do? Well, what can we do? You might just have discovered with online teaching, as I have, that you have to change the activities quite often. I know one of my managers, Claire, for example, at NELC, is always saying, change the activities with the online classes every sort of 10 to 15 minutes. So in an hour, you might be getting through 4 different tasks. That's an important thing. Also, to avoid that tiredness, we might just say, look, in a 2-hour class, you might have a 5-minute break. And you might just be realistic about that halfway through a class. Say, well, let's have a stretch break, for example. I like that term. I was talking about that with my co-writer, co-author and friend Margaret O'Keefe yesterday. It's maybe get them sort of moving around a little bit halfway through the class, or to just look away, from the screen, look outside the window, and to give their eyes a rest. Yeah, these are all sort of health and safety good recommendations. I think it's not really long enough, 5 minutes, but it depends how long the online class is. If it's an hour class, then it might just be a simple stretch for a minute or two halfway through. And if it's a 2-hour class, well, it's up to you and your teaching situation. You might just want to leave a song playing as well for those who want to listen, whilst others might maybe get up and have a coffee. Yeah, I think 5 minutes is fine for a 2-hour class, but that's my idea. Yeah, you might want to check with other teachers where you're teaching in your academy. Sharing the webcam, that's right. So let's have a look here. We can monitor students' engagement. That's very important. Do I want to see all my students on camera all the time? Well, no, sometimes I'm focused on the activity, the task, the exercise. Yeah. But I think it's good to see them on camera, certainly at the beginning, maybe after a task when you come back together again and you hear their role plays again, or there's a discussion, and before the end of the class, because we can tell if someone's sitting like this, looking tired, or if they're obviously on their phone or doing something else. Yeah, we can tell a little bit about how they're feeling, as you would in a normal face-to-face class. So this question, make sure they are on camera. It might depend with students who have either difficulties, technical difficulties, or who are just happy to be engaged with the audio. And I think with adult professionals in a class, we might have to allow some of them not to be on camera some of the time. That's right, reducing the talking time. That's right. They might be waiting to listen to other students. So use breakout rooms as much as possible. Right. Now I'm aware of the time. I've got lots to get through. So it's been great engaging with you in chat. But as you can see, that's very time consuming. So what's easier? I think the flipped classroom approach. Many other trainers and presenters will have mentioned that before. The idea that the students watch a video in preparation, or find an article in the news to prepare to talk about that, so that they do preparation before the class, or they read a grammar reference and do some grammar exercises, and then you're just checking, understanding and practicing that particular language item. So the idea of the flipped classroom. Group tasks, we've mentioned brainstorming, as you have been doing, and the idea of sharing. People talked about sharing photos. Yes, that's a great one. They can share screens. They can share notes in shared notes, for example, in BBB, or share notes in the chat. They can do online sort of web quests and online dictionaries. Yeah. For example, there was a bird at the beginning of this presentation on one of the slides in the mouth of a crocodile. Do you remember? I don't know what kind of bird that is, but maybe if there are bird watchers amongst you, you can I could ask you, can you look it up? Tell me what the name of the bird is, whatever. Or I've mentioned dictogloss. Can you, as I'm speaking, I haven't described it yet, could somebody please explain what a dictogloss is online? Or could you just go online and check, look it up and Google it? And the last point was from Nikki Hockley, who I admire very much. She's been working in online teaching and learning for many years now. And Nikki Hockley, working for consultancy, she was giving a webinar, a workshop the other day, and she was saying, when monitoring groups, we were talking about switching off the camera. You might want to switch off your camera when you're going into the breakout room and just keep the audio on. So when you enter the room, they won't see you, because I think if they see you on camera, it's like you're hovering over them. It's when you're monitoring the class and you're very close to a group, you start hovering and then they all go kind of shy, or they all go quiet, or only the most confident person is speaking. So I think when you're monitoring them in the breakout rooms, I agree here with Nikki that it's a good idea to switch off your camera, and you can intervene if necessary, or just simply listen and then move out of their breakout room and move on to another breakout room or join another Google Hangout call. So I think also this idea of turning the camera on and off at certain times can work. Okay, it's very good to find someone who, yes, but they might have to do that in a chat or in a discussion forum. I think that would work quite well between classes, maybe. So what else? Language of trends. Now, Charlie, are you there, Charlie? I'm going to talk about a couple of communicative activities that I think work well, that have been taken from material from business partner course books. This is a part of a business workshop, nice information gap, where there are 2 or 3 students and they describe graphs to each other. So I am student A, and it's like a graph Pictionary. You're probably familiar with the idea of a Pictionary. And here we have a line graph, and the graph should show sales revenue and net profit, but I am missing net profit. So Charlie, I'm going to ask you to describe the graph, line 2 for net profit, and we can
Sure.
do a fun activity. I'm going to try to draw. So I click on my draw function. A lot of your platforms have a draw function. Would you like to describe your graph?
Sure, of course. So net profit records
Yes,
year one. From
yes,
year one to year two, it increases from 0 to 6
yes.
million euros.
6 million, okay. Yes,
For year 2 to 3, it goes up dramatically to 20 million euros.
to 20 million. And could you use the past there, Charlie? So that's
Can I
a sharp,
use
yeah.
sharp? Yes, exactly. It's a dramatic increase to
That
20
the,
million euros.
right, so that there was a dramatic increase, that's right.
Yes.
Or net profits
However,
rose. Oh, yes, what happened then?
after the next 3 years,
Yes.
increases merely gradually to a maximum of 26 million euros.
Right. Sorry, can I just check with you? In year 3,
Yeah.
did it
From
stand at
year
20?
3,
Mm-hmm.
from 20 million to the projected year 2,
Mm-hmm.
it increases gradually
To
to 20
26.
million.
Oh, okay, yes, I got about 26 there. And after that?
Sorry, from year 3 to all the way to projected year 2, it
Oh,
increases gradually.
right. So I might have to undo that. Okay.
There you go.
Uh,
So from year
until
3 to the current year, it increases very slightly and slightly more, and then
like that.
gradually. Perfect.
Right. Well,
That is basically what I'm looking at, Iwonna.
I I have seen this, but I really can't remember because I had so many sort of things going on in my head yesterday. And oh, okay, that wasn't bad. That's the answer. So you can do something like this. You can sort of model that with a teacher, one of the students. And as you heard there, Charlie was using the present. So, make sure they're using the past if that's what you want to practice, or the present perfect. And you can use that to check lovely language for the language of trends, rise and fall, using also adjectives and adverbs there. So they can do that, and that will take a little bit longer, obviously, because if they have 3 students and each student has a different line graph, that's great. You can get students to create their own little graphs, very simple vertical and horizontal axis. And here we've got sales, revenue, net profits, and you can ask them to be creative and talk about, I don't know, the sale of computer games or iPhones at Christmas, or tangerines and bananas. Exactly. Okay. Exactly. You can do that with the one-to-one students and spend a little bit more time then with the one-to-one students, because you'll probably be interrupting and correcting and then asking them to repeat that back. So that's kind of one nice idea with the Pictionary. You can also, if it's a small group, they can do it on screen, and if they have the draw function available to them, as in BBB. If you don't have that situation, they can also do it on paper, if you have a more sort of simpler platform, and then just show their graphs on paper to the camera. Yeah, and then we can compare who's got the best graph, yeah, or who described it the most accurately, or whose is the worst, things like this. So another idea, building rapport, dialogues, well, socializing. Socializing is so important, I think. You've been doing it now in the chat. Very important also for the teacher to establish that kind of rapport, that nice sort of learning environment at the beginning. Whether it's asking about their weekend or getting the students here to talk to each other. So I would take a nice little dialogue like this. This is from the B1 level of business partner. It's a simple dialogue, and it just shows how we can create rapport by asking questions. And you can do this at lots of levels, I think, because even my advanced students are having sort of problems with question forms or question tags when they're upper intermediate. But here, take this dialogue. They might complete it. You could use the arrow function here, joining up the expressions, doing it as a gap fill. You can have the complete dialogue and just do it for pronunciation, ask them then to go away and change it a little bit with information about themselves, but and then you can remind them again, change with another partner at the beginning of the following class, for example. It's a great way. Or giving them a task, find something in common, yep, with one of your other classmates. Okay, now I believe we'll have about 5 more minutes. So we've talked about things like let me see, we've talked about just the building rapport, we've talked about the graph Pictionary, and presentations. Now, presentations lend themselves very well. This extract is actually from the C1, the advanced level in Business Partner. I often do courses with students at the university on giving presentations and presentation techniques. So how would I adapt this lesson? Here you can't see the complete lesson. You could see it maybe using an ebook, or if you have a PDF of the book that you're sharing. Students have their books, of course, with them at home. But here I might ask them to do the listening beforehand, so that would be asynchronous, and they can listen to the presenter talk as many times as they like, repeat the activity, do some gap fills there with the language, but then in class use this as a springboard. So what presentation techniques did the presenter use? Did they use all of them or just some of them? Which presentation techniques have you used in a recent presentation, or would you like to use next time? So I was talking to some upper intermediate advanced students yesterday with 2 auditors, and they told me they were doing training courses, for example, 2 other auditors. And we were talking through this lesson, and they were quite surprised. They have a 4-hour training session where 3 speakers just talk, give lots of technical information, and they were saying it's quite long. So we talked exactly as we've done today about, well, why don't you give them a break and the stretch break? We've talked about presentation techniques, get people interacting in the chat. If there's two of them, why don't they do a joint presentation to make it seem more interaction, more interactive rather? And here I do love this lesson, because you've got the example language here that you can go through, repeat with pronunciation practice, maybe doing work on the schwa that even advanced students find more difficult, and connected speech, help them to memorize it. So drilling here and pronunciation work well, I think, online. And you can even circle or draw or highlight particular particular, for example, activities. If you were going to join up, this isn't, what's this departing from convention, doing something different. Yeah, you can talk about that. I remember watching a presentation once, and the presenter threw a jacket at the member of the audience as soon as they came in. So they were trying to get our attention, but in the wrong way, because that's the only thing I remember from that presentation. A marketing director, I don't remember anything else. So we can use this as a springboard for chatting. Yes, obviously it depends on the team. Yes, this material is more advanced, but and there are plenty of other lessons though at the other levels for other presentation expressions. That's right. The different platforms do have their different pros and cons. And what I've said before, I think now that we've got used to working maybe in a couple of different platforms, we might have preferences. But I think it's also important now to kind of focus on what do we have in common with these different tools, because in the end they are tools to help us teach, and we need to focus now, I think, on the future and on our teaching and our learning and what's most effective. So we were asking, what is a dictogloss? Now we've had to wait till the end for the explanation. A dictogloss, people who are going, thank you very much, see you soon. Just to finish here, it's a kind of dictation, but you don't dictate word for word. You speak at natural speed. So you could take any text, short email, for example, from the book. This is taken from, again, the B1 level. Lovely letter here introducing yourself. The students might work on it beforehand, choosing the correct expression. They might do that beforehand for homework, but here you could dictate it using a dictogloss, and then together in groups they have a shared writing activity, for example, using shared notes, in the platform, or using a Google Doc or another shared document in OneDrive, and they recreate the email. So they've heard you say it at natural speed once, maybe twice, and then together with their language, they write it. And I find this kind of collaborative writing task works very well, and not just for advanced students, but for lower levels as well. And then because it's a shared document, you can see instantly, put it up on screen, compare their different emails, and then show them the model example again. So that's an example of dictogloss. Okay, yes, of course, quizzes and Kahoots, that's right. Those are all great, and you can add to those. So tips then for role plays and meetings, those lovely speaking activities, takes longer than you think. You need to set it up, make sure the students have the correct role cards, whether it's in Moodle or whether you've uploaded it to them via the chat. Allow time for them to listen to a group modelling or a pair modelling, either at the beginning and also at the end with feedback. Allow time for feedback and reflection, because we want to be talking about speaking, and also encourage peer observation and correction. So they might be listening more in an online class, which in a way is not such a bad thing, instead of chatting to each other in a class. I certainly, my Spanish students are like that, but get them asking questions, prompting and praising in the chat. So are you ready for what's next? These are the activities we've mentioned today. We've been doing some of them, doing polls. I've explained the dictogloss rather. We've talked about the Pictionary activity with the graphs. And now, right now, Charlie, would you like to put up the next poll? Then it's the last poll for today. Which of the activities from today would you like to, would you or could you or do you do? About 25% of them, all of them, or maybe just 50% of them, which is fine. Okay, we've got the previous survey there. I hope.
I just uploaded the correct one. So
okay, lovely.
you should see that now.
About 50%. Well, that's good. If you could use some of them. I hope I've given you some ideas that you could adapt and use or continue using in your classes, online classes or blended classes. Right. Thank you, Charlie. And the quote that you'll see in the slides there, you'll have access to the slides after the talk, is from a woman who teaches in the United States, and she is talking here about the future. And the quote is, compared to how long we've been teaching in person, online learning is in its infancy. So I think we still have quite a lot to learn, not necessarily so much about the tools and the nuts and the bolts, but how we're moderating our online classrooms, what we're teaching, and how our students are learning. And you can actually listen to her in a podcast if you look her up there. So thank you very much. And don't forget, now with a business partner, hot off the press as it were, there are ebooks now for the levels that you can use that will help you a great deal if you're using these course books online. And also a presentation tool, which I'm sure will help you very much. Thank you for all your thank yous. It's nice to sort of see you electronically. A big hug to everybody from Barcelona, and it's great to see that you've come from all these different places. Cheers. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iwonna. As always, that was a fantastic session. You have a few questions for you, and we do have some time if you're happy.
Lovely. Yes, let's take one or two questions, Charlie.
Great. So first of all, I had a response to the bird query.
Yes.
In what I believe is a crocodile's mouth is the Egyptian plover or plover.
Lovely. It's a beautiful bird. Right. Well, there's an example of a simple web quest. You can set students a task like that, and the boffins or the bird watchers or would like to look it up, and you can check later on at the end of class. Great. Any other questions for me there, Charlie?
Absolutely. So how much time do you consider we as teachers should spend in synchronous and asynchronous classes?
Right. Well,
is there an ideal balance?
Yes. I think we have to concentrate on, well, preparation as you would with any other class. You can't now obviously just walk into an online classroom, or you could just chat to the students and just have listen to their presentations, for example. But you do need to do that groundwork beforehand and make sure that know what they're doing so that they come to class prepared. Um, well, the question is $1 million question because it's how long is a piece of string. But we really need, I think, to focus our work, our preparation work, so the students know what to prepare for the class. You're there facilitating in the classroom. You're not a walking dictionary anymore. You're facilitating, and you're encouraging them, and you're mentoring them, and you're coaching them, and then you're setting up activities for the next class. But when it comes to discussions and forums and chats, try to keep your role minimal there as an e-moderator. It should be the students practicing their language outside the classroom with each other rather than with you. I wouldn't you shouldn't be replying to all of their discussion forum posts. But it is a big question actually with burnout and teachers working very hard. I know certainly in higher education, where we have where the students are doing an awful lot of asynchronous activities. Yes, we're coming to a close now. How much teacher talking time do you think is proper in an online class? I'll just take that question now that I can see it. That's a very good point. I found myself that, like today, well, because I'm presenting, I was talking way too much in the first couple of weeks when we had lockdown, and we had to transition very quickly. So that is something to look out for. So start with a little bit of socializing, getting students to socialize. If you can use breakout rooms, use them as much as you can. Ask questions and give feedback maybe at the end, and intervene less and intervene in order to correct instantly, because that's when students remember it and get them to self-correct and repeat their corrections. I hope that was clear. Yes. Okay, thank you. 1 hour should be enough for one topic. That's right, online classes. And we might break it up, having sort of 2 topics, maybe in a 2-hour online class. Another question, or do we have to finish now, Charlie?
We do have to finish there, but there was a very
Mm,
quick one. And what was the name
okay.
of the podcast you mentioned?
The podcast. It's in the slides. If I just go back to the slides there. Oh yes. So this was Flower Derby. She works in all kind of teacher settings, face to face, blended, and online. She works for a American university. I don't remember which one, but you can. She's also written a book in 2019 about online learning and teaching, and she's called Flower Derby. So if you Google her, there's a very nice podcast there with her, an interview with her.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you once again, Iwonna.
Okay, thanks to you.
Insightful session. And thank you to all of you attendees for spending the time to join us today as well. It's been great to have you, and we hope to see you at another Ready For webinar.
Great. Have some great lessons and have a good week. Bye. Bye, everyone.